The President. Questions. Question 1. Mr. Michael Tien. Thank you, President. It has been learned that the average overall band score of Hong Kong's candidates taking the academic module test of the International English Language Testing System, or IELTS, in 2011 was 6.4, which was the same as the score in 2007. However, during the same period, the scores attained by candidates from Taiwan, South Korea, and Malaysia had increased by 0.2 to 0.3, getting closer to or even surpassing that of Hong Kong. This phenomenon indicates that the English proficiency of Hong Kong's candidates has not made any progress in recent years, but the candidates from neighboring places have made progress. There are comments that Hong Kong people's English proficiency is very important for Hong Kong to maintain her status as a cosmopolitan city, and thus the authorities should pay close attention to the quality of English language teaching and should create a bilingual environment. In this connection, will government inform this Council A, as it has been found in research that compared with a large class of 38 or more students, teaching English in a small class of 21 to 25 students can provide more opportunities for teachers and students to converse in English, and students who participate in class activities more actively. Whether the authorities will consider setting a ceiling of 25 students for English classes so as to enhance the quality of English language teaching, if not of the reasons for that. B. Given that during my tenure as the chairman of the Standing Committee on Language Education and Research, I found that the majority of students lack the opportunities to be immersed in an English language environment, and English teachers in secondary schools currently had to teach more than 30 sessions per week, making it difficult to improve teaching in class. And some members from the education sector have also reflected to me that English teachers teaching 20 sessions per week will produce the most ideal teaching effect. Whether the authorities will consider setting a reference benchmark of teaching around 20 sessions per week for English teachers of secondary schools, if not of the reasons for that. And C, as it is provided in Section C of the Official Languages Ordinance, that both the English and Chinese languages are the official languages of Hong Kong and possess equal status, and Hong Kong is a cosmopolitan city, but some government documents are currently available only in Chinese without providing an English version, for example, the minutes of district council meetings. Whether the authorities will conduct a survey to find out if members of the public are supportive of the government requiring all text displayed to the public, including notices, signage, names of buildings, and so on and so forth, be available in both Chinese and English so as to create a bilingual environment. If not, of the reasons for that. Secretary for Education. President, figures show that the English standard of our students has been steady over the past or the last few years and compares favorably with our counterparts in nearby regions. In the last few years, many of our university graduates who have taken part in the IELTS have attained Level 6, in other words, competent users or above. Hong Kong has been able to maintain a high ranking in the 2011 test and is way ahead other places such as South Korea and Taiwan. Our reply to Mr. Tien's 3 questions is as follows. A. The average class size of public sector secondary schools is 33.4, and most of them are implementing split class teaching at the junior levels when conducting English lessons. The average size of such groups is 18 to 28. The overall student-to-teacher ratio in public sector secondary schools has improved significantly in the past few years from 18 to 1 in 05-06 school year to 15.3 to 1 in the 2011-2012 school year. These figures are comparable to those of other developed regions in Asia. To address their needs, schools are advised to deploy the resources allocated flexibly to enhance learning and teaching effectiveness. Further, we've relaxed the criterion for approving Secondary 1 classes in the 2012-13 school year through adjusting the basis for calculating the number of approved S1 classes by reducing the number of students in each class from 30 to 25, enabling schools to operate 3 S1 classes with an intake of 51 S1 students. The relaxation of the criterion for approving S1 classes actually further improves the teacher-to-student ratio of those schools facing the pressure of under-enrollment. We firmly believe that schools will make good use of the opportunity and better deploy the resources available for split-class teaching according to the learning objectives they set and the abilities of their students to improve learning and teaching effectiveness in the classroom. In fact, the existing English language curriculum framework allows space and flexibility for schools to provide a variety of activities to enhance students' learning motivation and develop the integrated use of the 4 skills of listening, speaking, reading, and writing. The learning of English is not confined to the classroom only. Through collaboration between local English teachers and native-speaking English teachers, an English-rich environment in schools can be created. And furthermore, over the past years, the scholar has also collaborated with different organizations in the community to create a conducive language environment and conduct activities to further enhance students' interest in learning English and the learning effectiveness. B. We are aware that some teachers may have a teaching load of more than 30 sessions per week. But as mentioned earlier, most English lessons are conducted in split class mode. We also encourage schools to deploy the resources dispersed flexibly to support teachers through such means as employing extra staff and hiring outside services. In addition, we have over the past few years introduced an array of support measures to help English teachers to improve classroom teaching, including, firstly, providing in-service professional development programs. Secondly, providing on-site school-based support services. For example, services provided by the language learning support section and the school-based professional support section. Thirdly, injecting 800 million and 300 million in 2006 and 2010 respectively to the Language Fund to enable schools to implement the English Enhancement Scheme and the refined English Enhancement Scheme so as to strengthen the English-rich environment in schools, empower English teachers professionally to teach better, as well as facilitate collaboration between English teachers and content subject teachers to promote the learning of English across the curriculum. Fourthly, expending over $500 million annually for the provision of a native-speaking English teacher for all public sector primary and secondary schools, operating 6 or more classes to enrich the English language environment in schools. Fifthly, sponsoring and conducting various large-scale activities through Scholar to create a conducive English language environment to raise students' interest in learning English outside the classroom. Sixthly, giving high priority to items relevant to the theme of effective learning and teaching of languages since 2009 to encourage schools to implement English enhancement plans, with so far 16 projects being financed by the Quality Education Fund. Seventhly, providing additional teachers to schools in need, including schools of Band 3 or the weakest students at S1 to S3. We will further strengthen teacher development to improve teachers' English proficiency and their teaching skills. Since there is no evidence showing that the number of teaching sessions per week and teaching effectiveness are necessarily related. We have no plans at the moment to impose a ceiling on the number of teaching sessions for secondary school English teachers. C. Under Section 3(1) of the Official Languages Ordinance, Chinese and English are the official languages of Hong Kong for the purpose of communication between the government and members of the public. As a general rule, therefore, government documents meant for the public, including important documents such as the policy address, the budget speech, gazette notices, consultation papers and reports, as well as other written materials like government web pages, notices and signs, and names of government buildings are in both Chinese and English. It is only in individual cases where there are strong operational or financial reasons that monolingual materials are issued. In such cases, the monolingual materials would generally include a bilingual caption, a summary in the other language, or a message in the other language directing readers who may understand only Chinese or English to another source where further information in the other language can be obtained. Though we have not conducted related surveys, we believe that the public expect written materials issued by the government to be in both Chinese and English. Such an expectation is in line with the government's language policy, which attaches great importance or equal importance to the two official languages. Mr. Michael Tien, Chairman. Now, I really couldn't help scratching my head when I listened to the reply. So, according to the reply, the education authorities have done a lot of work in this regard. But then, in Hong Kong, it seems that we haven't made any progress. But then, for the three countries I have mentioned, the students are doing better in the IELTS exam. So, why is it that our English standard has remained stable while in these three countries I've mentioned, the students are making progress? Why is it that we are complacent with a stable standard? I think we should try to catch up with other places. And then you said that the number of teaching sessions per week for secondary school English teachers may not be a relevant factor. So can you commission independent academics to conduct a research into this subject of reducing the workload of English language teachers in secondary schools so as to enhance teaching effectiveness? And some expatriates have told me that there are a lot of government papers or documents which are only monolingual and they can't understand the content merely based on the short message or the short summary. So what do you expect me to say to that expatriate? Mr. Michael Tien, you raised 3 supplementary questions, but you are only entitled to raise 1 supplementary question. All right, if I have to choose among the 3, I will choose the first one. So why is it that a stable standard is acceptable to the government when other places are making progress, when the students in other places are making progress? Secretary. Yes, President. I thank Mr. Tien for his question. Concerning the English standard of Hong Kong students, let's use the R results. In 2008, the average score in Hong Kong was 6.31. In 2011, it was 6.4. Taiwan, 5.66 in 2008, and then 5.9 in 2011. South Korea 5.7 in 2008, 5.9 in 2011. So I want to say that as the base figures are different, the extent of progress may also be different. But in Hong Kong, we are trying to provide an English-rich environment. Now, our district councils, during their meetings, most of them are conducted in, most of the meetings are conducted in Chinese. But then in the Southern District, where there is an expatriate district councillor, there is English used during meetings, and support is being provided. Mr. Yip Kin Yun, Yes, President, thank you. It has been said that the English standard of our students has remained stable. But then I understand that today the results of another international comparison are released. Previously in mathematics, we used to rank first, but now we're only third. And concerning science, our ranking dropped by more than 10. The Secretary is trying to paint an optimistic picture for members, but I hope that members will not think that our education system is very good. For S1 classes, there are 34 students in each class, and then in senior secondary 40. Yes, some schools do practice the split class mode, but then that's at the expense of the resources, limited resources in the schools. Teachers may have to take up more sessions, and so there, I think I want to say that there is no support from the government to schools with regard to the practicing of split class teaching. So what is your question, please, Mr. Ip? So I want to know whether the administration is going to conduct a review on the number of students in each class. And with regard to split class teaching for the English subject in secondary schools, will concrete support be given to secondary schools, and will a cap be implemented with regard to the number of teaching sessions per week for English teachers? And if the answer is yes, can a timetable be given? Secretary, yes, thank you, President. With regard to the number of classes and the class teacher ratio, I want to say that for junior secondary, it's 1 to 1.7, and then senior secondary 1 to 2.0. This is because we understand that at the senior secondary level, there are more subjects, and so we provide more teachers to give the necessary support. And then for senior secondary classes in particular, we have 4 core subjects, and they are compulsory subjects, and there are 20 electives, and then there are 6 language subjects available, 35 electives or career-oriented subjects, and so split class teaching is in fact very common at the senior secondary level. Now, say for example, even if there are 40 students in a class and each student chooses 3 electives, so split class teaching is quite common. But of course, we will closely monitor the situation. And as I have said in my main reply, it's important that we provide a conducive environment for the learning of English. And so Scholar, apart from promoting classroom learning activities, is also promoting learning activities outside the classroom. So there is a multi-pronged approach to try to raise the overall standard of English of our students. Mr. Ip, is it that your question has not been answered? I think the Secretary, can you repeat that part that has not been answered? President, the Secretary hasn't answered my question. Is the administration going to review the number of students per class at the senior secondary level, including the number of students per class under split class mode? And will there be a cap on the number of teaching sessions per week? Will more concrete support be given to the schools in order to implement split class teaching for English? Secretary, President, we will keep such matters under regular review. And I want to say that at a junior secondary level, many schools are practicing split class teaching. And in fact, there are a lot of support programs and subventions and subsidies given to schools for language-related activities. Mr. Martin Liu. Secretary, now, in fact, I have raised a written question on the teaching of English. Concerning non-native, or rather, I beg your pardon, we have native English teachers who, in fact, are primarily responsible for training non-native English teachers, and they do not teach too much in classes. So students are not able to benefit from learning from a native-speaking English teacher. In fact, many parents want their children to be taught by native-speaking English teachers. So why is it that you can't expand the native speaking English teaching program so that they can conduct more classroom teaching activities? Mr. Liu, now members are not allowed to ask a supplementary question to a written question. So, Mr. Liu, I'll regard your supplementary question as one which is related to this oral question. Secretary, President, native-speaking English teachers are responsible for supporting local English teachers. They help with the design of the school-based curricula. They also promote the professional development of English teachers. They prepare teaching materials, and they also organize outside school activities and also build up the database. A week ago, I visited a school, and I met the NET teacher. Now, there are 24 classes in the school, and the NET teacher can't teach all the 24 classes. Now, the NET teacher on that occasion organized some drama activities for students to help them learn how to use the English language. And in fact, the effect was very encouraging. The students were very enthusiastic in taking part in the activity. Ms. Claudia MO, thank you. It's quite regrettable that in Hong Kong, when we talk about the standard of English of our students, we emphasize stability. So it seems that maintaining stability is really very important. But then, Secretary, I want to say that you can ask many frontline teachers. In fact, I have taught English in primary schools, secondary schools, and university level. Some students have studied Shakespeare, but then they do not know how to conduct daily conversation in English. For example, he stood me up. They understand all these words, but they don't know what that means. And then come clean. They know the two words, but they don't know the meaning of coming clean. And President, I believe you've also taught English previously. And please ask your question. But I have to explain the background. I asked a senior counsel what was meant by past perfect progressive tense, and in fact he was also he also hesitated. And if I ask the secretary today what an adverbial phrase is, I don't think he can give me a reply offhand. Ms. Mo, please ask your question. I want to say that in Hong Kong, when we teach English, we really have to provide a conducive environment. Can we provide an environment for students to be immersed in English? That's better than teaching students Shakespeare. I think we now know why the standard of English of our students is so good. Secretary, please. I agree with the member in that it is not enough to learn English in the classroom. We need to learn everyday English and also English in the workplace. 3 weeks ago, I was with 300 students in a park, and that activity was conducted in English, and I conversed with the students in English on on everyday activities. At first, they were not too fluent, but then they spoke more fluently later. So I want to say that that activity was organized by the scholar in conjunction with the schools, and I think with such activities, students will be motivated to learn English and learn English well. So we are not satisfied with 6.4. This IELTS score. We understand that the students need to use English in their daily life. They need to know workplace English. And then concerning the standard of English of our teachers. Now the benchmarking for teachers, I think, is a very useful tool, and we are continuing to strive for improvement. We've spent about 25 minutes on this question, and I can only say that we have to move on, really.
Question 2, Ms. Claudia MO. Ms. Claudia MO, would you please ask your question as soon as possible? Sorry, Mr. President. Mr. President, some organizations that offer assistance to residents from the ethnic minorities have relayed to me that the Immigration Department always finds fault with ethnic minority residents, especially the Southeast Asians, South Asians, and Africans with dark skin color applying for naturalization as Chinese nationals, and the process and criteria for vetting and approving such applications lack transparency. These ethnic minority residents have been residing in Hong Kong for a long time and regard Hong Kong as their home, but their applications for naturalization have been refused. They are therefore not eligible for applying for the Hong Kong SAR passports. Such a situation not only undermines their sense of belonging to Hong Kong, but also often causes them inconvenience when they go through immigration clearance while traveling, working, or studying abroad. Besides, they may be unable to receive assistance or protection from the Chinese consulates in the event of natural or man-made disasters encountered abroad. In this connection, will the government inform this council, first, whether the Immigration Department has formulated internal guidelines on vetting and approving applications for naturalization as Chinese nationals to ensure that applicants of different ethnicity are treated fairly? If it has, of the details; if not, the reasons for that. Whether the department will, when vetting and approving applications for naturalization as Chinese nationals, take into account if the applicants are stateless persons, if they are non-ethnic Chinese children lawfully adopted by ethnic Chinese Hong Kong residents, and if they are of Chinese descent. Second, of the specific details of the rejected applications for naturalization as Chinese nationals by non-ethnic Chinese Hong Kong residents each year since the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR, including the number of applications received by the department and the number rejected, with a breakdown by the ethnicity of the applicant and the reason for rejecting the application. And third, given that Section 5(1)(b) of the Chinese Nationality Miscellaneous Provisions Ordinance stipulates that any decision to approve or refuse the nationality application in the exercise of the discretion, there shall be no need to assign any reason for the decision. Whether the authorities will consider amending the provision, providing the applicants with the reasons for rejecting their applications, as well as putting in place an appeal mechanism. If they will, of the details; if not, the reasons for that. Secretary for Security. Mr. President, my reply to the honourable member's question is as follows. First, according to Article 18 and Annex 3 to the Basic Law of the Hong Kong SAR of the People's Republic of China, the nationality law of the People's Republic of China, CNL, shall be applied in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region from the 1st of July 1997. The explanations of some questions by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress concerning the implementation of the nationality law of the People's Republic of China in the Hong Kong Special Administrative Region, that is, the explanations, have been endorsed by the Standing Committee of the National People's Congress, and the government of the Hong Kong SAR is authorized to designate as Immigration Department to handle applications related to Chinese nationality in the Hong Kong SAR according to the CNL and the explanations. Besides, the government of the Hong Kong SAR enacted the Chinese Nationality Miscellaneous Provisions Ordinance, Chapter 540 in 1997 to stipulate the implementation details of naturalization, form of application, charges, etc. Pursuant to Article 7 of the CNL, foreign nationals or stateless persons who are willing to abide by Chinese constitution and laws and to meet one of the following conditions may be naturalized upon approval of their applications. First, they are near relatives of Chinese nationals. Second, they have settled in China. Or third, they have other legitimate reasons. Article 8 of the CNL stipulates that any person who applies for naturalization as a Chinese national shall acquire Chinese nationality upon approval of his application. A person whose application for naturalization as a Chinese national has been approved shall not retain foreign nationality. The department will consider each application for naturalization as a Chinese national on its own merits and will in general give consideration to the following factors: whether the applicant is a near relative who is a Chinese national having the right of abode in Hong Kong, whether the applicant has the right of abode in Hong Kong, whether the applicant's habitual residence is in Hong Kong, whether the principal members of the applicant's family, spouse and minor children are in Hong Kong, whether the applicant has a reasonable income to support himself or herself and his or her family, whether the applicant has paid tax in accordance with the law, whether the applicant is of good character and sound mind, whether the applicant has sufficient knowledge of the Chinese language, whether the applicant intends to continue to live in Hong Kong in case the naturalization application is approved, and whether there are other legitimate reasons to support the application. Besides, as stated in Section 51A of the Chinese Nationality Miscellaneous Provisions Ordinance, where in connection with any nationality application, any discretion may be exercised under or pursuant to any of the provisions of the CNL as implemented in the Hong Kong SAR in accordance with the explanations, the discretion shall be exercised without regard to the race, color, or religion of any person who may be affected by its exercise. This provision applies to the naturalization applications handled by the Immigration Department, including those from stateless persons, non-ethnic Chinese children being legally adopted by Hong Kong ethnic Chinese couples, and non-ethnic Chinese residents. Second, from the establishment of the Hong Kong SAR, that is July 1997, to November 2012, the Immigration Department has received 15,518 applications for naturalization as Chinese nationals, of which 12,658 were approved, 1,293 not approved, and 193 withdrawn. The yearly breakdown has already been set out in Table 1. The original nationality of applicants whose naturalization applications were approved from July 1997 to November 2012 is mainly Pakistani, Indonesian, Indian, Vietnamese, and Filipino. Detailed application and approval figures are in Table 2. The Immigration Department does not maintain statistics on refusal reasons. Third, Section 51B of the Chinese Nationality Miscellaneous Provisions Ordinance applies only to decisions in the exercise of discretion. In exercising discretion to handle applications for naturalization as a Chinese national, the Immigration Department often needs to consider information such as whether the applicants are of good character. Therefore, it is not appropriate to disclose the reasons behind the decision. The decisions made after considering the above factors are in the exercise of discretion, rather than findings of the law or facts. If an appeal mechanism is set up for this kind of decisions, the final decision will be made by the appellate authority instead of the Immigration Department, which is designated by the government of the Hong Kong SAR as authorized by the explanations. Moreover, pursuant to Section 5.2 of the Ordinance, nothing in this section affects the jurisdiction of any court to entertain proceedings of any description concerning the rights of any person under the CNL. Applicants who are not satisfied with the outcome of the applications may request the Immigration Department in writing to reconsider their applications. All reconsiderations will be handled on a fair basis. Thank you, Mr. President. Ms. Claudia MO. Thank you, Mr. President. President, this cloth is from Unison, and this banner is also from the same association. Well, President and Secretary, don't depart so quickly in a moment. I'll present you with this pack of submissions. Well, basically, the Secretary's reply is the reading out of laws. We're very familiar with them. I can even recite some of them. However, he failed to answer my questions. Originally, I mentioned the suspicion of racial discrimination, but the expression was deleted from my original question. In the organization, Philip Gan Ho-ming in Chinese, requested to be naturalized as a Chinese national. He originally wanted to join the September LegCo election on Hong Kong Island. He applied twice, but the immigration officers concerned told him not to go because his bloodline was not appropriate. He used the word bloodline. Secretary, why is it that another person, we all know that his Mr. Zimmerman, applied for naturalization using the same reason? Why is it that another Pakistani Hong Kong permanent resident with 3 generations living in Hong Kong for 97 years in total, why has his application been refused twice? Can he seek a reconsideration? Secretary, President, I'd like to thank Ms. Mo for her question. The organization just wrote me a letter raising a similar question. When we handle naturalization applications under CNL, we have to follow procedures and laws. In fact, all applicants can, before submitting any application, obtain a leaflet, a relevant booklet from the department in relation to the details. Just now, it's asked that there are a number of refusal cases. We do not differentiate races. We only vet the applications in accordance with the nationality concerned. Now, in the tables, that is in Table 2, I set out the top 5 original nationalities: Pakistani, Indonesian, Indian, Vietnamese, and Filipino. Section 7 of the CNL sets out a number of factors to be considered, including whether the person, the applicant, is settled in China, whether there are legitimate reasons, whether there are near relatives of Chinese nationals. Now, I have set out a whole series of factors to be concerned and will adopt a comprehensive approach. Whether or not an applicant has Chinese bloodline is not one of the factors to be considered. Factors to be considered have already been set out in my main reply. Here, I won't repeat them. Ms. Mo mentioned individual cases. Of course, here, we won't comment on individual cases. The last sentence of my main reply is, applicants who are not satisfied with the outcome of the applications may request the Immigration Department in writing to reconsider their applications. I also asked my Immigration Department colleagues who told me that they had handled such reconsiderations. Ms. Chung Lai-wan, Dr. Chung Lai-wan.
Guidelines. The Immigration Department considers each application for naturalization as a Chinese national against a host of factors and criteria. As Secretary Lai has just mentioned, whether the applicant has a close relative who is a Chinese national with the right of abode in Hong Kong, and whether the applicant has a sufficient knowledge of the Chinese language. Would it be informed the Council the basis for which the Department has set these determining factors, including their purpose and relevance? Specifically, would he explain to the Council the relevance of whether an applicant's close relative being a Chinese national has anything to do with the applicant's own naturalization as a Chinese national? Should the close relative have the right of abode but not naturalized as a Chinese national? How would the applicant be handled differently? And as an international city, what is the purpose of requiring applicants to have a sufficient knowledge of the Chinese language? Thank you.
Secretary. Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to thank Dr. Chang for her question. First, Dr. Chang asked, under Section 7 of the CNL, one of the factors to be considered is whether or not there are near relatives of Chinese nationals. So that's one of the criteria, and is also one factor to be considered. The CNL sets out very clearly 3 conditions. Apart from those 3 conditions, when an application comes in, we'll also vet it in accordance with a series of criteria. Of course, if the applicant has a near relative of Chinese national, that factor will be considered. But that does not mean that so long as a person has a near relative there, his application will automatically be successful, because the CNL makes it very clear that those who meet one of the following conditions may apply for naturalization. So we set out a series of general factors for consideration. Of course, if an applicant submits some of the reasons which he deemed relevant, we'll also consider. In the application form, there is a part for the applicant to state why he hopes to do so. As for overseas jurisdictions, as far as we understand, each jurisdiction in handling naturalization applications has some criteria. Well, the general criteria include the following: whether or not the applicant is familiar with that country. Some countries even set examinations for the applicants so that they can show their knowledge of the background of the country, etc. Now, if a person wants to stay in a particular jurisdiction, the language environment is, of course, a relevant factor. By relevant factor, I mean among factors to be considered, we do look at this particular factor as well. Mr. Abraham Sheikh. Thank you, Mr. President. President, I hope that the Hong Kong government will, on a fair basis, vet these applications. As far as I can remember, for those who are rich and powerful, it's very easy for them to apply. Mr. Zimmerman, father of Lan Kwai-fong, Mr. Zimmerman, and also Mr. Mike Rouse had successfully applied for naturalization. But what about the Indians and the Pakistanis? Why is it so difficult for them? Can you tell us whether there's a fair system? Or you are afraid of the rich and the powerful, so you approve their applications? Secretary, first of all, here I have to give a clear reply to members' questions. For every application, it depends on the conditions of the application, the information submitted by the applicant, and the set of conditions that we announced on public occasions. Just now, the Honourable Member mentioned a number of successful applicants, but those were just a few of them. In fact, after the handover, we've approved a large number of applications. From Table 2, you can see that some members may consider those applicants ethnic minorities, Pakistani, Indonesian, Indian, Vietnamese, and Filipino. But we also had quite many successful applications, even for them. Well, there are occasions, of course, we do not have the practice of making public the names and particulars of the successful applicants. But with these statistics, I believe members will be able to see that in handling the applications, for most of the applications, the Immigration Department, after looking into all the factors concerned, did exercise discretion in approving the applications. Mr. Abachan? Sorry? Oh, Mr. Abraham Sheikh, your question not answered. I asked whether the rich and powerful have special methods to resolve this issue. Is there a fair method? Sorry, Mr. Sheikh, your question has already been clear. Your question is clear. Secretary, please reply. Mr. President, we treat each and every application equally. Irrespective of the social status of the applicant, we apply the same yardstick. Mr. Abachan, many years ago, I had a meeting with the Immigration Department together with the Indians and Pakistanis in relation to naturalization applications. There are a number of points for you to consider. First of all, language proficiency. Many Indians and Pakistanis rejected were actually women. Perhaps they're not very fluent in either English or Chinese, but their children were all born in Hong Kong. When these women applied for naturalization and Hong Kong as their passport, they're rejected very often. But in the rejection document, the Immigration Department would not set out the reason of rejection, so it's only guesswork. In future, in replying to applications, can the department give specific reasons? And secondly, many of these people applied for SAR passports at the same time of applying for naturalization. And $3,000 to $4,000 would be incurred for the passport application. That's a heavy burden on the Indians and Pakistanis. Now, can we have a pre-qualification system such that the rights of the applicants will not be undermined because of financial considerations? Well, Mr. Abachan mentioned thresholds or hurdles obstructing the applications for naturalization from Indians and Pakistanis. Secretary, Mr. President, the Chinese proficiency of the applicant is, of course, one of the factors of consideration. But that does not mean that an applicant who is not fluent in Chinese will definitely be rejected. To look at this issue from another angle, an applicant who is fluent in Chinese may not be 100% successful. Hong Kong permanent residents possessing Chinese nationality under Article 154 of the Basic Law can apply for a Hong Kong SAR passport. The issuance of a Hong Kong SAR passport is based on a number of conditions, one of which is like this. The applicant needs to have Chinese nationality. Therefore, a non-Chinese national Hong Kong permanent resident cannot, in law, obtain a Hong Kong SAR passport solely because he has permanent residency or right of abode in Hong Kong. Therefore, naturalization may be related to the passport issue to a certain extent, but not totally. As for the application fee, we did some calculations on how much resources would be required to handle such applications before we arrived at the fee or charge. When submitting the application, the applicant will be informed by our colleagues. Our colleagues will explain clearly to them these fees and charges. As the Honourable Member said, when submitting the application, the applicant has to pay a fee, which is not refundable. So our colleagues would explain to the applicant, if the applicant is willing to spend that sum of money to apply, then we'll follow the established procedures to handle the applications. Well, has totally distorted my question. I'm pointing to those Indians and Pakistanis who are not conversant either in English or Chinese. So you think the Secretary has not answered your question. My focus is they have to pay $3,000 to $4,000. So for the Indians and Pakistanis, if they fail time after time, they will have wasted a lot of money. In many other jurisdictions, when you ask for naturalization, they have examinations with standard scripts for reference. So, Secretary, for naturalization as Chinese nationals, can there be pre-qualification tests, etc., so that people can know in advance, so that they don't need to spend huge sums of money? Well, Mr. Chen, you've asked many more questions. Members, when you ask questions, please be precise and please make your questions clear. Secretary, Mr. Chan said that because no rejection reason is given, the applicants don't know how to prepare themselves. Secretary, any supplement? Mr. President, first of all, for any applicant, we would like him to study in detail the booklet that we have published, so that he knows all factors of consideration in handling his application. If he has doubts, of course, our colleagues will, in accordance with the relevant contents of the booklet, explain to them. But if you want a pre-qualification system, then most probably it would be like what society is saying. Sir, apparently, you may not satisfy one of the criteria. Then misunderstanding may result. It seems that we don't want to accept his application. We want to reject his application. But in fact, that's not our intention. Therefore, the existing practice is to allow the applicant to study carefully the factors to be considered. If he does not understand any factor, we will explain to them. I think this is a proper practice. We've spent over 28 minutes on this question.
In questions 1 and 2, apart from the members who have asked the question, there are only 3 other members who can ask supplementary. A number of members were waiting and could not ask questions, but we have spent much more time than that specified in the House rules. So I ask members to be precise and succinct, and officials, please answer to the point and refrain from providing information that is not related to the question. Question 3, Dr. Joseph Lee. Thank you, President. Earlier on, the government announced a package of short to medium-term housing and land supply measures to alleviate the problem of housing shortage. They include changing the use of the sites or the premises of industrial buildings. For example, the renewal of old industrial areas will be accelerated to release more sites suitable for residential development, and suitable industrial buildings will be converted into public rental housing (PRH) or transitional accommodation so as to increase housing supply. In this connection, will the government inform this council: A, whether it is assessed the current number of vacant industrial buildings in Hong Kong, the number of such buildings which are located on sites suitable for rezoning to residential use, and the number of those suitable for conversion into PRH, as well as the reasons for the sites of certain industrial buildings being unsuitable for rezoning to residential use, of the authorities' measures to facilitate changing the use of such industrial buildings and expedite their revitalization, and alternatively, what other means the authorities will adopt to minimize vacancy of industrial buildings as far as possible. B, whether it's assessed the differences in terms of the time and resources required between redeveloping such buildings into PRH and constructing PRH on newly formed land, if it has, of the details; if not, whether it will do so expeditiously. And C, as the authorities have said that they are exploring ways under the policy of revitalization of industrial buildings to facilitate wholesale conversion of such buildings to transitional accommodation use on an interim basis, whether they've assessed the number of industrial buildings whose owners will make such applications and the number of transitional accommodation units that can be provided, of the criteria for vetting and approving such applications, and whether they have formulated measures to monitor if the converted industrial buildings meet the safety standards. Secretary for Development. President, the Chief Executive announced on the 30th of August 2012 10 short to medium-term housing and land supply measures, of which 2 were related to industrial land, including 1, to convert the Chai Wan factory estate for public housing, rental housing used by the Housing Authority, and to launch 2 redevelopment projects of industrial buildings by the Urban Renewal Authority for residential and offices use, and 2, to explore the feasibility of allowing conversion of industrial buildings where appropriate for residential use under the town planning regime and the Buildings Ordinance. These 2 measures fall under the purviews of Transport and Housing Bureau and Development Bureau, and we're committed to taking forward the relevant work. My reply to the 3 parts of the question is as follows. The area assessment of industrial land in the territory, area investments, completed by the Planning Department in 2009, proposed to rezone about 60 hectares of industrial sites in various districts for non-industrial uses, among which a total of 16 sites, 5 are government sites, comprising about 30 hectares of land, were proposed to be rezoned for residential use. The relevant authority is under the process of amending the outline zoning plans concerned for implementing the said rezoning proposals. The area assessments, which also investigated the uses of industrial buildings located within industrial and business zones, found that the overall vacancy rates of these 2 zones in terms of floor area were about 6.5% and 8.4% respectively. When rezoning an industrial site for residential use, we have to take into account a series of factors, including whether the vacancy rate of the site is at a high level, whether the site is under single ownership, whether the industrial buildings on the site has relatively high building age, whether the site is already built or committed for non-industrial uses, whether there are still active industrial activities in the industrial buildings on the site, and whether rezoning the site for residential use would give rise to industrial-residential interface problems in the aspect of environment and transport. To encourage the provision of suitable premises through redevelopment or wholesale conversion of vacant or underutilized industrial buildings to meet the current social and economic needs of Hong Kong, with a view to better utilizing the precious land resources, the government has implemented the following measures for revitalization of industrial buildings since April 2010. 1. They are to encourage redevelopment. Lowering the application threshold for compulsory sale orders under the Land Compulsory Sale for Redevelopment Ordinance from 90% to 80% of ownership for industrial buildings aged 30 years or above situated in non-industrial zones to address fragmented ownership in flatted industrial buildings. B. Allowing tailor-made lease modifications at pay-for-what-you-build premium. C. Allowing owners to modify the lease for redevelopment to opt for payment of 80% of the land premium by annual installments over 5 years at a fixed rate interest rate if the total premium exceeds $20 million. 2. To encourage wholesale conversion. A. Owners may apply at a nil waiver fee for change of use of existing industrial buildings for the lifetime of the buildings or the current lease period, whichever is earlier. The following eligibility criteria have to be met. 1. Industrial buildings aged 15 years old above and situated in industrial, commercial, or business zones. 2. Joint application by all owners of the building. 3. There should not be any increase in building height, building bulk, or total gross floor area after the conversion. 4. The buildings cannot be reverted to industrial use during the waiver period. And 5. Full market premium is payable when the buildings are redeveloped in the future. B. Placing GFA exempted utility installations. For example, machine room for lift on the main roof not exceeding 50% of the roof area of the floor below would not be regarded as increase in building height. While installation of claddings or curtain walls on the external walls would not be regarded as increase in building bulk. C. Allowing minor changes to the existing building frame, including variations to the internal and external structures, on the condition that demolition of the external structures should involve no more than 10% of the total GFA of the existing building and that there is no net increase in the total GFA after conversion. The deadline for submission of applications under the above revitalization measures is the 31st of March 2016. Part B in my reply. Government sites rezoned for residential use will be allocated for public or private housing development in accordance with their surrounding areas. For example, whether they are located near MTR or other major public transport facilities, their suitable development intensity, etc. According to the Transport and Housing Bureau, the time and resources required for each individual PRH project vary, and the HA does not have information on the relevant assessments of redeveloping industrial buildings into PRH and constructing PRH on newly formed land. Generally speaking, having regard to the land characteristics, infrastructure facilities, planning requirements, and local objections of individual PRH development projects, DHA will have to carry out various technical studies, provide the required infrastructure facilities, obtain the necessary planning permissions where appropriate, and maintain close communication with the relevant government departments, district councils, and local communities. Part C. In converting industrial buildings for residential use, the Town Planning Ordinance and statutory plans, the Buildings Ordinance and its subsidiary legislation, including those safety-related standards, and the conditions in the relevant land leases have to be complied with. Currently, the government is studying possible ways in the context of the policy on revitalization of industrial buildings to facilitate wholesale conversion of suitable industrial buildings to transitional accommodation use on an interim basis as a stopgap measure. The relevant study is still in progress. Whether private industrial buildings will be converted for such use will depend completely on the intention and circumstances of individual owners, such as their ownership status and return considerations, etc. We're not in a position to assess in this stage the possible market response to the relevant measure upon its introduction. Once the measure is introduced, the authorities concerned will ensure the compliance of relevant safety standards in the converted industrial buildings. Dr. Joseph Lee. Just now, the Secretary, in his reply to my question, that he is not in a position to gauge the market response with the introduction of such measures. But in relation to these industrial buildings, there are already a lot of subdivided flats in them. And how can you make sure that these flats are habitable and that there are no safety hazards involved? Secretary. We do not yet have an accurate statistics of the number of people living in such flats in industrial buildings. And we are very concerned about the safety standards of people living in industrial buildings. And we have stepped up our enforcement measures. Under the Buildings Department, there is a dedicated team inspecting such buildings, and enforcement action will be taken when subdivided flats are spotted. I think Dr. Joseph Lee has asked a very good question. Secretary, do not chat. You're suspected to have engaged in the business of subdivided flats. You still owe us an explanation. You are taking advantage of other people's peril. Mr. Leung Kwok-long, would you please ask a supplementary question to this question? But this is a matter of integrity. Mr. Leung, if you continue to say something not related to this question, I will stop you. President, he said that the HA, the Housing Authority, does not have information on industrial buildings being turned into PRH or private housing. So he has no idea what is going on. I have reason to believe that if a person take advantage of someone who is at peril and forget about his conscience for profit, and build his greed and avarice on someone's expenses. Would you please stop now? Yes, I understand. Secretary, before you give an account of your subdivided flat problems, do you have to declare interest here in the council today? Are you in a position to talk about conversion of industrial buildings? Because converting industrial buildings into subdivided flats is prevalent. Mr. Leung Kwok-long, you're not asking a supplementary. Please sit down. Do not speak again. No, you have to listen to me. In the formulation of policy, did you declare interest? In formulation of policy and in the X-Code, did you declare interest? That's a very question. Yes or no? I think the question raised by Mr. Leung is not related to the main question. Mr. Wong Kok-ing. Thank you, President. At the beginning of the Secretary's reply, he mentioned about the conversion of the Chaiwan factory estate for PRH. I thank the Secretary and the administration for responding to the needs of the local residents. My question to the Secretary, well, it mentioned in his main reply that if it involves a wholesale conversion, then the request have to be made by all owners, and this is a very high threshold. The fact is that when it comes to the revitalization of industrial buildings, they may not get a unanimous decision from all owners. But the owners involved would very much like to have some flexibility so that the industrial building can be revitalized. So I ask the administration, will they set up a cross-departmental working group or an office to help industrial building owners so that they don't have to go the long way around to have their industrial buildings converted, so that they only have to deal with simplified procedures. Secretary. The requirement for wholesale conversion of such buildings will have to be made by all owners, because we have to make sure that no one is living in the building for hygiene and safety reasons. Say, for example, fire safety. So if the industrial building is to be converted for residential use, all owners will have to be involved. In a building with fragmented ownership, and if there is a certain level of consensus, say for example, well, under the Land Compulsory Sale for Redevelopment Ordinance, the threshold has been lowered from 90% to 80%. This is one of the measures we have in place. And as I've said, the URA has some pilot schemes, one of which has already started. Industrial buildings with fragmented ownership can, through the pilot scheme of the URA, be converted. What hasn't been answered? Will the Secretary consider setting up a cross-departmental working group or office to help owners who would like to have their industrial buildings converted? Secretary, we have not considered that yet. The reason is that in relation to applications to convert industrial buildings, vetting procedure has only taken a very short time. And out of 88 applications, and there are only a dozen or so left to be processed. Mr. Charles Mork. With the revitalization policy in place, the prices of industrial buildings have been on the increase. However, there is insufficient supporting measures, and the enforcement actions are not aligned. And in our sector, when it comes to data center, there is no proper categorization. If you are using it as a data center, you treat it as an office. I would like to ask the Secretary, would you keep abreast with the times? Well, when there are so many different new uses, would you review the different types and update them so that new uses will not be put under old types? And when it comes to handling their applications, then they are not subject to outdated and inappropriate requirements by different departments. Secretary, we will from time to time review to find out how we can improve from different perspectives, including planning. And I will study what Mr. Mork has said. Ms. Chen Yun-han. I share some of the view of some members. When the Secretary talked about revitalization of industrial buildings, that was in the time of Donald Tsang, who said that it would be beneficial to creative industries. Ms. Chan, would you please don't hold the microphone in your hand, clip it on your lapel. Yes. Now there are conversions to residential uses or hotels. There are still people who are in the creative industries, and they need to use that. At the moment, the administration's policy is fragmented. At one moment, you said that it will be for creative industries, and then you talk about there are housing problems. And then you come up with this revitalization of industrial buildings for them to be converted into hotels. Has the administration thought about it thoroughly, that the original policy is to revitalize such buildings to help the creative industries? I think it's a bit haphazard. How do you deal with the problems of industrial buildings? Secretary. People engaging in the creative industry in industrial buildings, if they're allowed to live there, there will be problems, as I've mentioned before. That is, if in the same building there are other activities and at the same time people living there, there will be safety issues and also hygiene issues. There are 10 applications for revitalization include changing the use into a recreation and leisure venue to provide us a floor area for the creative industry. And in October last year, the administration has given funding approval to the Art Development Council to help people leasing premises in industrial buildings for art and cultural use. But there is no consistent policy. Please repeat your question. With the haphazard policy, how can you consolidate it? The administration said that there is no supporting measures for those in creative industry. So can you answer me? Is there a consolidated and comprehensive policy helping different people with different needs? In relation to people engaging in art and culture sector, under the revitalization policy, we remove barriers to facilitate the conversion of industrial buildings to other uses. But we do not set down a fixed target about the percentage of the area to be for certain use, because that is also subject to the market. And we'll also have to take into consideration the wish of owners. The role of the administration is to remove barriers so that it can be worked out in the market. Dr. KWOK Ka-ki, when it comes to land and housing policies, there are problems. Then they propose to convert industrial buildings. But if you give the wrong prescription to the problem, it may cause other problems. Well, the Secretary can't even give us information about subdivided flats in industrial buildings. That I find disappointing. A lot of people using industrial buildings are small and medium enterprises, including those in the creative industries. Some buildings are converted into hotels, and as a result, rental in such buildings have hiked. Have you done any studies as to how many people have been pushed out as a result? I mean, those SMEs who are benefiting from the low rental by renting in industrial buildings. Secretary, we are aware that rental of industrial buildings have increased, but it is due to a number of factors. We closely monitor the situation. People engaging in different economic activities in industrial buildings, they may move to other districts when their rentals increase. I don't have information about those people moving from one district to another, or they simply disappear from the same district. What hasn't been answered? Have they done any studies or survey? Is it the case that you don't even have any information about it? Secretary, we don't have the figures asked for by Dr. KWOK. With the launching of the revitalization of industrial buildings and up to now, we are closely monitoring the situation, including those people living in such buildings. We have spent 23.5 minutes on this question.
CHAN Kin-por.
Question number 4, Mr. CHAN Kin-por. Thank you, President. Quite a number of middle-class people have relayed to me their dissatisfaction that while they hope to have access to the quality healthcare service of local private hospitals, the significant increase in service charges in recent years has deterred them from doing so, and they can only seek medical treatment in public hospitals instead. Most of the private hospitals are charitable institutions which are exempt from tax under Section 88 of the Inland Revenue Ordinance, Section 88. They must be established solely for charitable purposes recognized by the law. The Inland Revenue Department IRD will conduct reviews periodically and ask these private hospitals to submit their account statements and other relevant documents so as to ascertain whether their activities have deviated from the charitable objects and whether their business and profits derived therefrom meet the requirements under Section 88. ILD would then decide whether their tax exemption status should continue to be be revoked. In this connection, would the government inform this Council A of the details of the reviews conducted by ILD in the past decade on whether the tax-exempt private hospitals were still eligible for tax exemption, including the frequency of such reviews, the years in which the reviews were conducted, and the outcome for each hospital. B, of the criteria based on which ILD determines if the uses of the private hospital's income and assets have deviated from their charitable purposes and whether their business meets the requirements under Section 88. In cases where deviations have been identified, whether ILD will first issue a warning to the hospital concerned and revoke its tax exemption status only when the situation has not been rectified, and whether ILD has issued any such warning and revoked the tax exemption status of any private hospital in the past decade, and C, whether there are differences between the criteria applicable to private hospitals mentioned in B and those adopted by ILD for other charitable institutions or trusts. Of the number of charitable institutions or trusts other than private hospitals whose tax exemption status was revoked by ILD in the past decade, whether ILD will review if the relevant criteria are two legs. Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. President, my reply to the questions raised by Mr. CHAN Kin-por are as follows. A, at present, among the 11 private hospitals in Hong Kong, 9 of them are operated by 7 charitable bodies which have obtained tax exemption status in accordance with Section 88 of the Inland Revenue Ordinance, or IRO. Over the past 10 years, the Inland Revenue Department, or IRD, conducted a total of 19 reviews of the above-mentioned charitable bodies. Owing to the secrecy provision in the IRO, the IRD cannot disclose information of any tax cases, including the details and results of the review concerning the above-mentioned charitable bodies which operate private hospitals. B and C. Currently, there is no statutory definition of what constitutes a charity or a charitable purpose in Hong Kong. In handling charitable bodies and charitable purposes, the ILD has all along made reference to the cases in the common law as the determining criteria. According to past case law, charitable purposes include relief of poverty, advancement of education, advancement of religion, and other purposes of charitable nature that are beneficial to the community. Relief of sickness is also a charitable purpose as ruled by the court. The above criteria are applicable to all charitable bodies with tax exemption status under Section 88 of the IRO, including charitable bodies which operate private hospitals. Apart from the above criteria, according to the requirements under Section 88 of the IRO, and same as other charitable bodies carrying on trade or business, charitable bodies which operate private hospitals have to comply with the following conditions in order to maintain their tax exemption status. 1. Their trade or business should serve to carry out the objects stated in their governing instruments, or such trade or business are mainly carried on by persons benefiting from such charitable purposes. And 2. The profits derived from such trade or business are solely used for charitable purposes and are expended substantially in Hong Kong. For revenue protection, the IRD conducts from time to time reviews of tax-exempt charitable bodies. Same as the treatment for other tax-exempt bodies, the IRD will require charitable bodies operating private hospitals to furnish account statements, financial reports, annual reports, and any other information related to their activities, etc., to verify if they are still in compliance with the legal requirements. If any tax-exempt charitable bodies are found to be carrying out activities incompatible with the charitable objects stated in their governing instruments, or if their income and assets are found not wholly used for the charitable purposes stated, the IRD will require them to provide further information so as to decide whether their tax exemption status should be retained or revoked. Generally, the IRD would allow the charitable bodies concerned to give an explanation and take appropriate remedial measures, including termination of all activities not relating to the charitable objects of their governing instruments, before revoking their tax exemption status. If they fail to comply on or before the deadline, the IRD will revoke their tax exemption status. In the 10 financial years between 2002-2003 and 2011-12, the IRD revoked the tax exemption status of a total of 909 charitable bodies. Currently, the above-mentioned 7 charitable bodies which operate private hospitals are all on the list of tax-exempt bodies under Section 88 of the IRO. Owing to the secrecy provisions in the IRO, the IRD cannot disclose if it has ever issued warning letters to any of the charitable bodies which operate private hospitals. Section 88 of the IRO serves to provide tax exemption for organizations which have fulfilled specified eligibility criteria. The scope of that provision is mainly confined to the determination of whether or not an organization is liable to tax. From the taxation perspective, we consider that the relevant provision has served the due purposes of granting appropriate tax exemption for various types of charitable bodies and protecting revenue. Mr. CHAN Kin-por. Thank you, President. In the main reply, it said that in the past 10 years, the IRD has conducted 19 reviews on charitable bodies operating private hospitals. So on average, once every 3 years. Private hospitals have huge profits. If you allow them to be exempt from tax, our revenue will suffer a lot. Will the IRD step up reviews? For example, at least reviews should be conducted annually. Secretary? Which secretary? Let me take this. The IRD would from time to time carry out reviews of tax-exempt charitable bodies. If there are cases warranting special attention, of course, we can increase the frequency of reviews. Together with relevant policy bureaus, we would cooperate to do this, and we welcome other people providing information to the IRD. We would increase the frequency of reviews as appropriate. Ms. Mak-Mei-Kyun. President, many private hospitals have complied with the lease or grant conditions in providing low-cost beds, but still their fees and charges are still on the high side, which are not affordable to ordinary people. Would the administration ask the private hospitals to increase the transparency of fees and charges soon so as to balance the needs for hospital beds in public and private sectors? Which secretary? Secretary for Food and Health. President, in the code for private hospitals, their charges and fees must be transparent. Before a patient receives treatment, he is entitled to know the fees and charges to be payable. And the hospital should, at the registration counter or other suitable locations, publish such information. The DFH will investigate into the cases of complaint as regards whether the code on the fees and charges has been complied with by private hospitals. To further enhance transparency, the administration would make reference to the foreign experience, such as the introduction of package charge and also the provision of a platform to announce fees and charges. This is to protect the right to know of patients so that everyone knows what he has to pay in terms of fees and charges. Dr. KWOK Ka-ki, private hospitals are non-profit organizations. They are charitable organizations. I have 2 sets of figures. Baptist hospitals, the turnover 1.6 billion, profit 340 million, or 20% as profit. 2010, $17.6 billion as turnover, $280 million as profit, or 16% as profit. And they have a reserve of 2.4 in reserve. St. Teresa Hospital in 2010, the turnover 1.72 billion, and also the $440 million or 25% as the rate of profit. So these charitable bodies are earning 25% in profit. Why is it that the government continued to allow them to make such profits? And if a charitable body is still making a profit of 25%, is it still eligible to be a charitable body? Has the administration to take any action about such a high rate of profit and or high profits? Secretary, in my reply, I already say that as long as they comply with the requirements, the eligibility criteria, that is the profits are used on charitable purposes and the profits are expended substantially in Hong Kong, then that will be in compliance with the ILO. As for what are charitable purposes, well, they can use the profits for other charitable objects in their governing instruments, so that they can spend the profits on other purposes in the governing instruments, such as advancement of education or advancement of religion, as long as such purposes are in line with the charitable objects, then it will be in line with the ILO. I wonder if Dr. Ko would like to supplement. Secretary for Health, Food and Health. In our regulation of private hospitals, we have this other consideration. That is, we'll look at whether the private hospitals concerned are in compliance with their land grant conditions. For some hospitals, in the land grant is provided that the profits must be plowed back to invest in the operation of the hospital concern or other relevant charitable purposes. Ever since 2010, hospitals which have been given land through private treaty grants will be required to submit audited accounts and relevant financial information. The Department of Health and the Lands Department are looking into these accounts to see whether the hospitals have been in compliance with the land grant conditions. If any cases of non-compliance is detected, the cases will be referred to the Lands Department for follow-up action. Dr. Kwok, do you think your question has not been answered? Please repeat the question that has not been answered. You can only repeat the part of your question which has not been answered. I asked that a charitable body has earned such a high profit, more than $2 billion. If they do not violate the very lax ILO conditions, would you be taking any action to follow up? So what have you done to ascertain the eligibility as a charitable body? Well, I've already said that under the ILO, there are certain requirements and certain criteria. And as I've said, if the money is spent on charitable purposes, then it's in compliance with Section 88 of the ILO. Mr. Leung Kok Hong, President, I'm not going to digress this time. In your reply, Secretary, you said that if they fail to comply on or before the deadline, the ILD will revoke their tax exemption status. And in the 10 financial years between 2002-03 to 2011-12, the ILD revoked the tax exemption status of a total of 909 charitable bodies. I have this question for you. You have revoked 909 such charitable bodies' charity status. Have you reviewed some of the cases and found that they should not have their charitable status revoked? Have you got other cases? Have you looked into other cases and found that their status should not be revoked? Secretary for Financial Services and the Treasury. I don't have such data. Why? Have you lost those status? Well, you ask whether the Secretary has got the data. I think the Secretary has given you a reply. Listen me out. This is a supplementary question. They give us a big set, and I'm asking that what happens with a subset? Well, you may wish to queue up again. Mr. Paul Chair. Well, the director of all this report has been published, and through the hearings, we know that some hospitals have dubious arrangements to handle their profits. So apart from revoking their tax exemption status under Section 88, has the administration considered, or will you be ready to consider, to do something about the tax to be payable that have been earned over the years? And would there be any question of criminal liability? Well, I'm not quite sure I've heard the question clearly. If they are in compliance with Section 88 criteria, so what follow-up action are we supposed to take then? Let me clarify. If the so-called charitable bodies have, or through inappropriate means, channel the profits and they maintain on the surface the impression that they are charitable bodies, can the administration pursue the matter for accounting for the profit apart from revoking their status as charities? Can you also pursue the question of criminal liabilities? As I have said in my reply, if they do not comply with Section 88 criteria, for example, profits are used for non-charitable purposes, we can revoke their tax exemption status. That's what we can do. What about prior tax unpaid tax for previous years? Well, we can take follow-up action for profits prior to the revocation. Mr. Paul Chair, it's not just a question that you can take action. Would there be a question of criminal liability, or would you be pursuing their criminal liabilities? If the Secretary is not clear about the answer, I can accept a written reply. Well, that's very much case-specific. The ILD will look at each case individually. So I can only tell you that whether it's actionable or not. Criminal liability? What about criminal liability? Well, it's not a question of whether you can, or it's a question of whether you should. If tax is payable and it's unpaid, of course we can pursue the matter. Mr. Albert Ho. President, I think our concern is that these bodies have been granted the status of charitable body under Section 88 of the ILO, but in fact, well, we are concerned whether in fact they are using the profits on charitable purposes. According to the Secretary, if you discover that it's not done, you can pursue the matter. But there's no regular oversight and monitoring mechanism. Maybe you have to depend on complaints lodged with you. But we are also concerned about the way they run their activities. If it's a charitable body, which is supposedly set up for charitable purposes, but their mode of operation doesn't look like that. They are trying to earn huge profits through their operations. They are charging very high fees and charges. So are you going to monitor their mode of operation as well? They are supposedly there to run private hospitals as a charity, but they are charging high fees and charges. If you are unable to pursue this issue, shouldn't you be revising the law so that you can monitor their operations. Secretary for Food and Health. As I've said, this is something that the Department of Health will monitor. There's a recent report from the Director of Audit in following up the issues raised in the report. We have already told the PAC, the Public Accounts Committee, that starting from 2010, the Department of Health have been asking the private hospitals to give us figures if there's such a requirement in the land grant conditions, and we are also looking at the information received together with the Lands Department to see if they have violated any conditions in the land grant. And if that's the case, then the Lands Department can take action to enforce the grant. And Mr. Ho is also concerned about the control over fees and charges. Let me state this again. We are not going to impose any control of fees and charges of private hospitals, but we are going to review CAP 165 to review the overall regulation of private hospitals. And one of the issues would be to enhance transparency of fees and charges so as to better safeguard the interests of the public and patients, and also to improve the services they provide. Well, I'm not talking about the land grant, and I'm not targeting just private hospitals. I'm talking about Section 88 charitable bodies. If they adopt the dubious operation modes, why is it that they're not monitored? How are you going to regulate the mode of business or operation of charitable bodies? Secretary for Financial Services and Treasury. I have to state again that Section 88 only decides whether there's a need to pay tax or whether tax is exempt. Of course, the IRD would just try to collect as much tax as the law allows. But of course, if it's exempt under the law, we provide the exemption. As for the mode of operation, it's up to the individual charitable bodies. And some policy bureaus may exercise control over certain matters of operation. Then that would be taken up by the relevant bureaus. I asked whether there's a need to improve it. They haven't given any direct reply. Well, I think the question has been answered, and we have spent more than 23 minutes. We have to move on to number 5.
Dr. KWOK Ka-ki. On the 21st of June this year, the media uncovered a number of unauthorized building works in the mention of the CE who was about to assume office. In the written statement issued on 23rd of November in relation to the issue of UBWs, it's mentioned the CE disclosed that an extension of some 200 square feet on the lower ground floor of House 4 of the mansion had been demolished in November last year, and the space in question had been bricked up. He had not made any application or given notification to the building department before carrying out such works. In reply to press inquiries, the CE said that his understanding was that an UBW already dealt with no longer exists. Meanwhile, the BD indicated on the 27th of November that during a site inspection of the mansion on 26th of June, its staff had found on the lower ground floor of House 4 an external wall which did not match original building plans, and that on the 27th of June, it had issued a letter to the CE and the authorized person appointed by him requesting them to provide information about the wall. The BD had issued 3 written reminders, but no response had been received. In this connection, with the Government Informed Council A, given that neither the CE nor the AP appointed by him had responded to the 4 letters from the BD, whether the BD has taken law enforcement action in accordance with the existing policy. If it has, of the details, not the reasons for that. B, during the period from 21st to 30th of June this year, whether the former Secretary for Development had summoned the key persons involved in the aforesaid UBW case and requested the CE to open up the wall to enable the authorities to investigate if there was any extension part behind the wall, whether the incumbent Secretary for Development had summoned such key persons since he took office, and if they had not done so, of the specific reasons for that. And C, in accordance with Section 14 of the Buildings Ordinance, of the circumstances under which a property owner may carry out the aforesaid works to demolish extension parts and break up the space in question without obtaining the building authority's approval and consent, whether an UBW already dealt with no longer existed, is one of those circumstances. Whether the government has received the relevant application from the CE since the 21st of June this year, if it has, of the date of application, details of processing of the application and date of approval. If not, whether the BD will take law enforcement action, including instituting prosecutions, if it will, of details. The Secretary for Development. Mr. President, the government attaches importance to building safety. In dealing with unauthorized building works, the Buildings Department has been upholding the principle of acting in accordance with law and being impartial in taking action according to the Buildings Ordinance Cap 123 and the prevailing enforcement policy. The Buildings Department takes enforcement action against each and every UBW without making any special arrangement because of the identity of the owner. The department will not be particularly stringent or lenient because the owner is a senior government official or a celebrity. I would also like to take this opportunity to reiterate that both the former Secretary for Development and myself are responsible for policy making. Enforcement of the BO falls under the purview of the Buildings Department. The BD officials have been handling each UBW case independently and professionally in accordance with the law and the prevailing enforcement policy. Both the former Secretary for the Development and myself did not and will not give any instruction to the Buildings Department regarding enforcement in respect of any individual case. As for the three-part question, my answer is as follows. As for A and B, in response to media reports on the 26th of June this year that there might be an unauthorized servants' room on the lower ground floor of House 4 at number 4 Peel Rise, the Buildings Department conducted an on-site inspection on the same day. At that time, the department did not identify any unauthorized servants' room or new UBWs, but noticed that the position of a part of the external wall of the original storeroom did not match with that shown on the original approved plan. In accordance with the established practice, on the following day, i.e. the 27th of June, the BD issued a letter to the owner and the authorized person requesting for information on the construction and purpose of the external wall. When replying to media inquiries on the 28th of June, the department, according to facts, responded that it did not identify any unauthorized servants' room or new UBWs during the inspection of 26th of June. In his reply, the BD also pointed out that it was following up with the AP appointed by the owner because while it did not identify any unauthorized servants' room as reported, it did notice that the position of part of an external wall, which did not match with that shown on the original approved plan, and therefore it had to follow up with the AP appointed by the owner. In accordance with the established practice, the BD will not announce investigations that have not been completed. Therefore, in its reply to media inquiries on the 28th of June, it did not mention the external wall, which was still under investigation. Subsequent to the letter of the 26th of June sent to the owner and the AP requesting for information on the construction and purpose of the external wall, the BD issued 3 written reminders to the AP urging him to provide the information. Since, according to the inspection on 26th of June, it has yet to be confirmed whether the external wall was a UBW and there was no obvious sign of danger, the BD, in accordance with the established practice, requested the owner and the AP to provide information with a view to determining the necessary follow-up action. This practice was not different from the established practice of the BD in handling other cases. As mentioned above, the Secretary for Development is responsible for policy making and will not participate in any enforcement, whereas the Buildings Department is responsible for enforcement of the Buildings Ordinance. Both the former Secretary for Development and myself did not summon the owner of the AP or the AP appointed by the owner in any case. As for part 3 of the question, my answer is as follows. The different rectification works for UBWs are subject to different requirements under the Buildings Ordinance. Some works are exempted works, which may be carried out without any need for applying to the BD. Some works fall under the scope of the Minor Works Control Scheme. Owners may carry out rectification works through the simplified provisions of the system. Depending on the type or on the types of works, reports may be submitted to the Buildings Department after the works have been completed. According to Section 14(1) of the Buildings Ordinance, some works require prior approval of plans and consent of the Buildings Department before works can commence. In respect of the floor space on the lower ground floor of House 4, the owner issued a statement on Friday, the 23rd of November, which included information on the floor space. The Buildings Department conducted an on-site inspection on the following working day, i.e. Monday, 26th of November, and immediately requested the AP appointed by the owner to provide information and arrange for the opening up of the wall as soon as possible for a detailed inspection. During the Buildings Department's site inspection on the 29th of November, an opening had been made in the wall, and the BD staff identified that there was a floor space of about 30 square meters behind the wall. After inspection and assessment, the Buildings Department confirmed that the floor space concerned was an actionable UBW and issued an advisory letter to the owner on the 3rd of December advising him to remove the UBW as soon as possible. The owner and the AP are required to submit a remedial proposal in respect of the removal works to the BD, and the works may only commence after the BD has given its consent. Concerning the external wall, as it was erected within the area of the lower ground floor of the original building and did not involve the structure of the building, upon assessment it is confirmed to be exempted works, which does not require the Buildings Department's approval before erection. The Buildings Department staff will continue to analyze and assess the information obtained in the inspection and follow up with the AP appointed by the owner with a view to determining the further enforcement action that should be taken. Dr. KK Kwok. Mr. President, yesterday there was a reply in Kam Chin Chun because of UBWs. 2 villages were fined $26,300. The judge criticized the 2 owners for blatantly flouting the law, and then the defendants responded by saying that senior officials could break the law free and get free. Well, I do not want to comment this case. Now, after the 27th of June, the administration wrote to the CE 4 times, and didn't take action. And in November, when he gave a written statement, the Buildings Department then took action. I can recall that when there was the incident of UBW, the former Secretary for Development said that everybody will be treated equally, and therefore a big team went to the house of Henry Tang. Now in June, when the Buildings Department identified a wall, and the wall was different from the original plan, approved plan, the Buildings Department in fact had a lot of technology, including ultrasonic technology, and it could also demand for the demolition of the wall, but it didn't take action. What's your question? Mr. President, that shows that the administration is given special treatment to him. Why there are two different sets of standards for two different persons? You pass the buck to the frontline staff members. Isn't that irresponsible, Mr. President? The Secretary for Development. Thank you. Mr. President, law enforcement by the colleagues of the Buildings Department has all along been impartial, and they have all adopted a uniform standard. As the Director for Development, as for Secretary for Development, I am responsible for policy making. I'm not involved in the enforcement of law on individual cases. A former Secretary and myself have never given any instruction to the enforcement action taken by the Buildings Department. As for the UBW of village houses in Shangshui, in Kamjin village in Shangshui, you cannot compare this case with the present issue. As for the UBW, there, one story was put up to a three-story village house. A notice was issued in January 2009, and in February another notice of clearance was issued, and the owners did not respond. As late as December 2011, prosecution was instituted. Well, in order to inform members the consistency of law enforcement, let me give you two more examples. One example was that in June last year, it was reported that in a house in Hong Kong Island, there was a suspected basement, which was a suspected UBW, and the BD wrote to the owner asking for access, while the department was waiting for the arrangement for giving access. The Buildings Department inspected the house from outside and did not notice any safety issue, and therefore did not break open the door or apply for a warrant from the court. There was another case in April this year. It was reported that in New Territories there was a multi-story house which within a housing estate. It was suspected that there was a suspected basement. The Buildings Department followed up the case and asking for access. Despite contacting the owners many times before, some of the units have not been inspected. But basing on the inspection from outside, and there is no obvious sign of danger, and because of resource consideration, the Buildings Department has not broken into those buildings or seek any warrants from the court for access. Now we receive tens of thousands of complaints or reports on UBWs. In 2011, we received over 40,000 complaints. Basing on resources constraint in dealing with UBWs, we need to give priority to safety. We need to set our priority accordingly, and we cannot just apply for warrants from the court for every case or break open the doors of the units. Our position, or the BD's position, is to encourage cooperation among owners. Rule procedure. He's wasting our time. That's meaningless. He should answer the question. Mr. Lee Chao-yan, I think the answer given is pertinent to Mr. Kwok's follow-up action. Mr. Kwok has pointed out that in dealing with different cases, the Buildings Department has adopted different standards. I think the Secretary is referring to other examples. He has adopted 2 different standards for 2 different CE election candidates. He is really not answering my question. This is not a question and rule procedure. The Secretary, would you be brief and precise? Now, since the allegation is very serious, I have to provide more information to members. Mr. President, in dealing with 2 cases which Dr. Kwok referred to, we've adopted the same standard. Thank you. Mr. Tony Che. Thank you, Mr. President. Now the Secretary said that when the Buildings Department inspected house number 4 and discovered a wall which did not match with the building plan, and then issued 4 letters. In November, about 5 months had elapsed. Now, according to the existing buildings ordinance, if the owner does not cooperate and if the owner keeps on stalling, is there any provision in the law to authorize the Buildings Department to take action? When the owner doesn't provide the necessary information, when the owner is stalling, then the Buildings Department can ask to enter and or even to use force to enter in order to collect evidence. The Secretary, as I've already replied to that earlier, with regard to the question raised by Mr. Chair, under the Buildings Ordinance, if need be, we can go to the court and apply for a warrant, or we can even break open the door and get into the building. Now, is there any time limit, say, on stalling? The Secretary, under the law, there is no specified time limit. Now, the Buildings Department just follows its established practice. Mr. Chan Kin-por. Now, in his answer, the Secretary stressed that the Department would not give special treatment because the owner is a senior government official or celebrity. It enforces the law impartially. Can the Secretary tell us, with regard to C.Y. Leung, the CE's mention with regard to the UBWs in that mansion, as alleged by some members, you adopted 2 different standards in dealing with Henry Tang's house and the CE's house. Now the Secretary has just mentioned the treatment given to other cases. I want to know whether the same standard has been applied to the Leung's house as well as the Tang's house, and there is no double standards or triple standards. The Secretary. Thank you. Mr. President, with regard to these 2 cases, according to my understanding, senior government officials, the handling of UBWs, of senior government officials or celebrities, now upon reception of reports by media, the Buildings Department sends its staff members immediately to conduct an inspection and then report to the public the outcome of inspection. Concerning the case of York Road and also the case of Peel Rise, there was no difference. Now, as for the York Road case, upon the first visit, no entrance was made, and then entrance was made after a few days. As for Peel Rise, after the entrance was made upon the first inspection. But one cannot compare directly the 2 cases. Concerning the case of York Road, entrance was only made on the 4th day after report was made, and the media provided quite a number of photos and design drawings of the UBWs. Somebody, such as APs or RSEs or registered contractors, might have breached the law knowingly. The requirement of seeking approval from the buildings department before commencement of works, or they might have made false representations to the PD. Therefore, there was preliminary information, adequate preliminary information for further investigation. As for PRIs, I've already spoken a lot on that. The only thing I want to add is that the building department will continue to analyze information obtained and talk to follow up the matter with the owner and his AP, and then determine the most suitable law enforcement action. 7 members are waiting in the line, but we've already spent more than 23 minutes. They will have to follow up on other occasions.
The last oral question, the Honorable Ma Fung-kwok. Thank you, President. The Hong Kong Coliseum or Hong Kong Sea in Hong Kong is a major venue for large-scale sports events, entertainment programs, pop concerts and conventions. Some hirers of Hong Kong Sea have related to me that although the government has carried out large-scale renovation works in HKC for a number of times, the equipment acquired is outdated and unable to meet their needs. They've also pointed out that the terms and conditions for hiring HKC and the related policy which have been adopted for years are rigid and outdated. Besides, the daily rent for Hong Kong Sea's arena is $55,100 or 20% of the gross ticket proceeds on that day, whichever is higher, which is among the highest in the world, with numerous other costly charges such as charges for visual recordings of performances, and hirers are also required to make extra payment for broadcasting sponsors' advertisements in HKC. On the other hand, the stadium office has the right to broadcast during hirers' event advertisements which it has solicited. In this connection, would the government inform this council A, whether it has formulated criteria and procedures for determining the renovation projects needed to be carried out in HKC and the equipment to be upgraded or acquired, and if it has, of the details, including whether venue users from the performing arts sector and the sports sector need to be consulted so as to ensure that equipment in HKC meets users' needs. If consultation needs to be conducted, of the details, if not, the reasons for that. B, whether it has planned to review the terms and conditions for hiring HKC and the related policy to ensure that they are kept abreast of times and facility uses and organizing activities. If it has, of the details, if not, the reasons for that. And C, of the criteria based on which the levels of Hong Kong Sea's venue rental and various charges are set, whether promoting the development of the performing arts and sports industries is one of such criteria, if not, of the reasons for that, whether it reviews HKC's various charges on a regular basis, if so, of the details. Secretary for Home Affairs. President, I thank the Honorable Ma Fung-kwok's question. Opened in 1983, the HKC is probably the largest indoor multi-purpose stadium in Hong Kong. It can also be used as a venue, performing venue for large-scale events such as celebratory events, pop concerts and entertainment and cultural activities. In almost 3 decades since the opening of the HKC, the Leisure and Cultural Services Department, or LCSD, has reviewed the terms and conditions of HKC's hiring policy and upgraded and enhanced its facilities in the light of users' feedback collected through different channels, with a view to providing a quality venue for the sports sector, the entertainment and performing arts sector, as well as the public. The reply to the 3 parts of the question is as follows. A, apart from regular minor maintenance and upgrade works, the HKC underwent a major renovation for 6 months in 2008-09 since its opening, to mainly dovetail with the staging of the basketball and volleyball competitions in the HKC during the 2009 East Asian Games hosted in Hong Kong. In planning the renovation works, the LCSD had consulted sports associations which held major sports events in HKC, including the Volleyball Association of Hong Kong, China, and the Hong Kong Basketball Association. Taking into account of the views of the disabled, the number of wheelchair seats in the venue had been increased. As for the entertainment and performing arts sector, the LCSD collected their views through regular customer liaison meetings and operation meetings attended by regular hires of the HKC, including representatives from the presenters of pop concerts. Upon the requests of the sports sector, as well as the entertainment and performing arts sector, the HKC replaced the video broadcast and electronic scoreboard system for enhanced video display, renovated the VIP lounge, changing rooms, dressing rooms, and function rooms, and provided broadband internet connections, etc. In addition, the HKC also provided additional warm-up areas for athletes and standard facilities for certain sports events, such as doping control room, media room, and enhanced the lighting system in line with the requirements of sports events. Ancillary facilities for the public, such as seats, foyer, staircases, platforms, and wheelchair platforms, were also upgraded to provide a more comfortable environment for the enjoyment of the audience. The LCSD has always observed the standards for international sports events and consults sports associations in acquiring sports equipment for the HKC. Performing arts events, it is the common practice that each performance has its own unique stage design and creative elements. The HKC provides basic ancillary facilities so as to give flexibility for the presenters to plan their own stage design for creating special effects for the performances. This mode of operation is widely accepted by the entertainment and performing arts sector. B. Since its opening, the HKC has upgraded the terms and conditions of hire to meet the needs of the sectors and development of society in a timely manner. The current 23rd version of the terms and conditions of hire was revised in 2008. In response to requests of the sectors and the audience, the terms and conditions of hire have been updated recently, including the enhancement of measures to protect intellectual property rights, the arrangement for hires to choose a ticketing system, as well as a substantial increase in the number of consignment tickets for hirers, etc. The existing venue management policy of HKC stresses on both the flexibility for presenters in organizing activities as well as balancing the requirements among different users. The venue management has maintained close liaison with the relevant party to meet the needs of hirers as far as practicable. The venue management will make every effort to facilitate the organization of events, provided that public safety requirements, for example, the stage and auditorium, are designed according to fire escape regulations, activities are arranged properly to avoid public disorder and accidents, etc., are fulfilled. The venue management is always willing to communicate with presenters and to review the terms and conditions of hire in a timely manner so as to cater for the needs of the sectors. The venue management will continue to hold regular customer liaison meetings and operation meetings to collect the views of users. C. The government makes reference to the charging schemes of similar venues in the local market, as well as those adopted by major overseas venues when setting the charging criteria for HKC. The hire charges of HKC have three parts, namely basic venue hire charges, and that is a daily minimum charge or 20% of the gross ticket proceeds on that day. Or 2. Reimbursable charges collected in accordance with the actual use of services, such as the provision of security guards, ushers, stage equipment, sports equipment, sound services, seating arrangements, cleaning services, etc. And 3. Rights fees, such as television broadcasting, audio-visual recording, display of commercial advertisement, location, film, etc. Levying higher charges as a percentage of the ticket proceeds, as mentioned in Item 1, is a charging policy widely adopted in similar venues around the world. It has the merit of being flexible in reflecting the market condition, especially for commercial activities, thereby upholding the user's pay principle. The charging criteria for sports and performing arts events are basically the same, but as the ticket proceeds of most sports events are not higher, some presenters only required to pay the basic venue hire charges. The LCSD will sponsor high charges for the venue for certain major sports or celebratory events, such as the 2011 FIVB World Grand Prix and the International Military Tattoo, so as to promote sports and performing arts. Regarding item 2, the reimbursable charges are collected to cover the actual expenses incurred in provision of services for the hirers while reflecting the market condition. For item 3, in order to promote sports events, concessions on individual items of Hong Kong will be given to sports events. For example, given that TV broadcasting helps promote sports events, the rights fees of TV broadcasting for sports events are lower than those for non-sports events. The charges for sound services for sports events are also lower than small-scale concerts or variety shows. The above charging mode takes into account both the market condition and Hong Kong's basic operation cost. The LCSD examines from time to time the high charges and the related policy of HKC in accordance with the needs of the sectors as well as the social development. The department is now conducting a review on a flexible approach for hiring the VIP lounge and the adjustment to the rights fees, and the review is scheduled for completion by the end of next year. In fact, the basic high charges and other charges of the HKC have not been raised despite the inflation and the increase in the actual expenditures since 1997, except that the high charges of the VIP lounge have almost been doubled after the renovation project in 2008. The utilization rate of Hong Kong Sea in the past 3 months was nearly 100%, which reflects that the current operation, the charging mechanism, can meet the practical needs of the market. Thank you, President. The Honourable Ma Fung-kwok. In part C of his reply, the Secretary said that the basic high charges or 20% of the gross ticket proceeds are charged, and for sports events, for most of the time, ticket proceeds are not high, and only the basic venue high charges are collected. I believe the majority of HKC's income comes from pop concerts. In 2011, the total income was 128 million, expenditure 40 million. That means a net profit of $90 million. I think that mainly comes from pop concerts. And according to IFPI's survey in 1996, it is found that the total market value of pop concerts dropped from 2 billion in 1996 to 400 million in last year. So you can see the pressure being borne by the industry. I'd like to ask the administration whether it has intended to lower the percentage. According to a reply, the charging scheme has made reference to other major overseas venues. But if you look at a similar venue in Taipei, is only charging 10% of the gross ticket proceeds, and Singapore only 15%. So we have to pay very hefty higher charges. How can we promote the development of our cultural industries? Secretary, we'll talk about two types of charges. First, a percentage of the gross ticket proceeds, or the second part is the rights fees. Rights fees are such as audio or visual recording and TV broadcasting. It's true that 20% of the gross ticket proceeds forms the major income of HKC. There are other places in the world where the percentage is also 20%. Compared with Taipei, yes, our situation is different. The seating capacity and the conditions of use in Taipei, for the one in Taipei, is very different from ours. Regarding our music market, our local music market, that the market value has dropped from 2 billion to $400 million. I think that is about proceeds from sale of records and CDs. Indeed, it is a world trend that revenue from sale of records and CDs is dropping due to an IP intellectual property reasons or due to the internet? In my main reply, I said that we are going to review an adjustment to the rights fees to be collected by HKC. We're preparing to adjust that sector. Mr. Chen Chi-jun, Mr. Ma Fung-kwok's question is asked from the point of venue users, but my question would relate to customers or consumers. Before I ask my question, I'd like to have a count of quorum. Mr. Chan Chi-chun, President, in para 2 of Part B of the Secretary's reply, the Secretary said that there's been a substantial increase in the number of consignment tickets for high-res. Now, for the presenters, perhaps it would be more flexible for them. But I know that the percentage of consignment tickets for HKC is particularly high. For ordinary venues, it's just 49%, but for HKC, it's 85%. From consumers' point of view, they say that they have been queued up overnight, but they're not able to get good seats. So I'd like to know whether this is favoring the venue high-res at the expense of consumers. Secretary. In fact, we have adopted the views of venue high-res in making this change. Now, if users are of the view that this is not to their disadvantage, we can reconsider this arrangement. But from the management's point of view, we would like to accommodate the wish of presenters as far as possible to make their events successful. Mr. Martin Liu. Thank you, President. As we all know, Hong Kong Sea is almost fully booked throughout the year. It goes to show that the community has a great demand for large-scale performing venues, and perhaps that's the reason why the charges of HKC are so high. Has the administration done any study on the supply and demand for large-scale performing venues, and plans to develop more such venues to dovetail the development of the relevant industries? Secretary. It's true that HKC is very popular to high-res. There are more unsuccessful applications than successful ones as far as the hiring of HKC is concerned. So the applications are many-fold oversubscribed. So in WKCD, we are going to have a large venue with over 10,000 seats. And as we all know, in Kai Tak, in that sports city, we will have a venue with a capacity of 50,000 seats, multi-purpose. It can be used for sports. It can also be used for cultural and entertainment events, as well as variety shows. Madam Chen Yuan-han. Thank you, President. HKC is very popular to community organizations and even professional organizations. However, there have been a lot of controversies over this matter. Even if you try to book a slot very early on, your application is rejected. Well, but they don't have any mechanism to tell you. I have received complaints from many people from the cultural and arts sectors. I'd like to know whether there is a mechanism for rejecting applications. Please enhance your transparency. Secretary. Well, the application procedures are very transparent and open. 12 years prior to the event, 12 months prior to the event date, applications can come in, and the slots available will be shown on the website, and updated on a regular basis for everyone to see. Indeed, the supply of slots cannot catch up with the demand, and there may be competing bids for the same slot. We have a committee to select the successful applicant for performance or for competition. So everything is very open and transparent. Mr. Mlang Singh, Ms. Chen Yuan-han, your question has not been answered? No. Well, we haven't got a table to say because you have hired this venue for many times, you rejected, and they have not given people a very clear criteria why their programs are not popular. And even if organizations apply for a slot variant, they cannot be successful. You mean there is no reasons for rejection? The grounds of rejection are usually because of competing demands. And so when one is successful, the other will be rejected. Mr. Mlang Singh, our colleague would like to have a quorum in order to watch the show on HKC. HKC was built for a sports venue, but I think there have been complaints that the floor of Hong Kong Sea is rather rugged, and sometimes boards have to be put on the ground to avoid injuries to athletes. I'd like to ask the Secretary whether it has ever, the Bureau has received such complaints, and what about the number of complaints against the facilities and management of HKC, and how does the department handle such complaints? Secretary, I'm not aware that the floor is rugged. Now, if for gymnastics, of course, mattresses have to be used. HKC has mainly been used for volleyball and football basketball events. Because of the East Asian Games, we spent some time to renovate the venue. We have made it possible for badminton events. As a result, we have improved the lighting and also ventilation. Prior to that, or perhaps very soon after the renovation works, we got complaints that the lighting arrangement was not very suitable for badminton events, and we have made adjustments as a result. Mr. Porter, thank you, President. Even the Secretary has told us just now that demand has far exceeded supply. Well, is there any priorities for the use of HKC for different events, for instance, for the use by commercial organizations and NGOs, for instance, given that there is a mismatch of supply and demand, these criteria are particularly important. I hope that they can tell us their selection criteria in a more transparent manner. Secretary, as Mr. Porter said, this was built mainly for sports events. The purpose was for sports. Of course, there's also a multi-purpose venue for other events. However, we do give priority to sports. Therefore, in my main reply, we talked about concessionary fees for sports events. Now, for major sports or celebratory events, and if an event is an M-mark event, that is a kind of sports that we like to promote, then the LCSD will show its support by waiving the hiring fees. Well, 1/3 of my questions are answered. The choice between music and sports events, okay, but what about the choice between NGOs and commercial buildings, and the choice between frequent users and non-frequent users? Well, Secretary, we have a vetting committee with various considerations. They will consider the nature of the event, the impact on the public. They have a list of criteria to work out the priorities. Mr. Porter is correct, because demand has outstripped supply. It is important that we have priorities. We've spent more than 23 minutes on this. The oral questions end here. motion under Rule 29 of the Rule of Procedure. There are a total of 3 members' motions for this meeting. First